All right. Well, I want to welcome to Amie. Amie, how do you say your last name? Is it Amie Comeau?
That's a great guess. It's
Good guess.
Comeau. Yeah,
Comeau.
everybody wants to say it their own way, but the
Hmm.
French, the EAU is water.
Hmm.
So all of the French names with the EAU, it's a O sound.
Okay.
But
Very good.
Como is that's how we say it in my family. So thank
Okay.
you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So this is the third of these conversations that I'm having that are called the Art of Inclusive Conversation. So my intention is to curate these conversations to really just help people and encourage people to just talk to each other, to be open and honest. I'd like to encourage people to kind of step away from selling things and step away from trying to position themselves as some sort of expert and just relate to each other, just really have, the deeper conversation. So the question I usually ask at first, Amie, is, how are you arriving? What are you feeling? What are you experiencing in your world at this time?
So I today I was able to really rest in the morning, which I've been in a transitional housing situation for a week
Hmm.
today.
Hmm.
And so yesterday I had done some driving around because I don't really know the area. And today I was able to really just allow myself to rest because I knew I was planning to meet you. I was able to book a room to do that. So I really feel like I'm arriving in kind of a quiet mindset. Of course, I've still got a lot of like very critical problems, but I have to just sort of put them aside and kind of just give myself this space in order to come up with solutions.
Hmm.
So I'd say, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling really receptive. Um, I don't have a lot of tension or my safety is pretty secure. I'm feeling pretty secure right now. Um, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm really joyful, and that's something that I really am working on. Is like I really want to feel in my day to day life that I have a lot of really easy joy.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's that's really what I'm working on. Was the second part? What do I bring? What am I bringing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Usually I ask, how are you arriving and what are you bringing? And what that question is really intended is like, what would you like to accomplish today? What would you like today's conversation to be about?
So I'm bringing just a lot of curiosity about the work that we had talked about years ago
Mhm.
with how it's sort of evolved into this. You're really just making your conversations public.
Mhm.
I'm very curious to hear like what has gone on in the last 2 years with you, with
Mhm.
kind of ending the one project and transitioning into something else. Yeah, so I'd say I'm bringing like a lot of curiosity, but also I'm just so grateful.
Mhm.
Just I'm really grateful that I was able to get to access the phone and to access
Yeah.
the internet, and it went relatively smoothly despite all the bouncing from one tech equipment to the next. I'm
Mhm.
still I'm still on, and I'm still making a video with you. So I'm
Absolutely.
really
Mhm.
feeling a lot of gratitude.
Great, great. Thank you, Amy. So I'll reflect back and kind of parlay that into my check-in as well. So what I'm hearing is that the conditions are pretty good, for you to be able to be here, to be able to be in a room, to have reliable technology. I'm really glad that your safety, you feel safe in this moment. So that's something that's really been alive for me and a lot of the people that I've been speaking with and I've been interacting with is that their safety is not assured. But I'm very glad to hear that, you feel safe being able to have this conversation. Yeah, and to respond also to your curiosity about the project, what I've been up to for the last 2 years. The project never really ended. It's still going on. But over the last 2 years, I produced a film. about my experiences being homeless and some of the some of the higher, kind of like the higher intuition that evolved from that. I also created a book and produced about maybe 27 hours of material that help people just have inclusive conversations like this and be able to form group coherence so that we can take action together, as a unit, and not, not as people who are competing or have different ideas and not understanding each other. So that's called the 2x2 algorithm, which is the book and some of those conversations, which I'll talk about more at the end of the conversation. But yeah, that's what I've been up to for the last 2 years. And what these conversations are about, the art of inclusive conversation, is people are still very confused. People still don't understand the project or understand what makes economic reform possible. And for me, my answer is, just take a step back and just relate to each other. Just learn how to be with each other, because so many people, they come up with business plans or they come up with strategies, but as people are trying to make sense of it, there's usually conflicts or butting of heads. And it's not that anybody in those spaces, it's not that anybody has any ill intentions. It's just that we're learning to be a little bit more emotionally open to each other so that we can put the pieces of the puzzle together rather than trying to force our way into a world that's not ready for us yet. But that's why these conversations are here, is just to relate to each other. So I will open with a question here, because from what I recall and the story I'm telling myself about my conversation, I remember having a very nice conversation with you. I guess it's been about, I want to say 2 years. I don't know if that's about right, but I think it may have been 2 years ago. And you had expressed that there was a kind of like a situation where you were close to being unhoused or homeless, and being able to get to a phone or get to technology, was something that's a commodity for us, that's easy for a lot of us to get to, was not so easy for you. So please tell me, where do you stand right now? You're saying you're in an unhoused situation now. You're in kind of like a public, kind of like a public support system. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What has that been like, and how was your experience with that in the last few years?
Well, no, you're correct. That is exactly what was going on. I had moved in 2015 to assist my parents with retiring. My father closed his business, and both my parents were in the hospital. So the situation was just that I didn't understand I would be a full-time volunteer caregiver.
Yeah.
And as much as, that role as caregiver just made a lot of sense, being the only daughter, it was just creating a lot of havoc in my life. Like, there was just all this animosity from my family because there just simply was nobody else to do this. The property that I was in was a very toxic place. It was on a toxic lake. It had cyanobacteria problems, which is why it never sold. We would have people come. I would have to prepare. I'd have to deal with the insect infestations. I'd have to, make it viewable for these people who just wouldn't buy. And there was a number of legitimate reasons why people weren't buying it. But the fact that, like, I had my name on it, in a life estate. So it was really this kind of legal entrapment where they believed they were doing the right thing. Like, my parents just followed the rules to whatever was explained to them. Like, this is how we do it. Unfortunately, that escalated after 8 years, and there was an event, and I was forced to leave in the middle of April to live in a vehicle. Like, I couldn't stay there anymore. And it had not sold. They had put a business in there in order to turn it into some kind of rental. which I don't want to inherit a rental property on a toxic lake like
Sure.
that I would have chosen for myself. But the fact was, I kept running into these social networks where, unless you're getting abused to a degree where you're hospitalized, they cannot place you in housing.
Wow.
So for 8 years, I'm calling these domestic violence hotlines, explaining to them the situation, and they would just say to me, "You don't have intimate partner violence." And I'm like, "No, I don't. But if you keep telling me I need to go get somebody to abuse me until I'm in the hospital in order to get
Wow.
housing, isn't that a little bit contradictory to the work you're trying to do with do no harm? Like, wouldn't that be your first tenant?"
Mm-hmm.
So just these arguments with people who, they have their own issues, they've got their own personal problems, they're not getting paid enough to do what they're doing. So that went on for a very long time. And then once I was actually living in the vehicle, which was actually a lot nicer,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I could then go and access the library without much difficulty. I could go and do stuff and not have to not have to be tied to the place where I needed to keep it clean. I needed to deal with whatever services had to happen in order to keep it functional. Mainly, I spent a lot of the last 8 years going for water because you can't drink the well water on a cyanobacteria lake.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of my wasted life for 8 years, was trucking back and forth to the springs in the mountains where I would just bring gallons of water back to cook with and to drink.
Wow. Mm.
So that was what was going on 2 years ago. And, I kept thinking that it's going to end. Like, I kept thinking this place is going to sell. Like, the housing market was insane. Everybody wanted to move to Vermont. There was just nowhere to move. Like, I thought for sure that somebody will take this off our plate.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't happen like that. And so eventually I was able to contact the domestic violence coordinator in the area near the hospital. So 2 years ago, I think, it might have been even longer that we talked, because
Mm-hmm.
in August of 2021, I had an ultrasound that showed there was a growth outside of my uterus.
Mm.
And so I've been trying to get into the hospital to do a laparoscopy to have this removed. And it's been 2 years.
Okay.
And so that's the biggest problem that I'm dealing with at this point, is like I'm having chronic pain, which is preventing me from being able to function in a way that I normally would.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got this coordinator who had the same condition that I had, the endometriosis. So she was completely compassionate about what I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, when you become homeless, they have these rules that you have to go by. And because I was in a different area, I had to sort of work with the group that was in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm so grateful that the hospital domestic violence people understood that I can't stay in the area that's 4 hours away from where I need to have this procedure.
Yeah.
So that's why
Yeah.
I'm in this temporary environment where it's a block away, where I can just walk over here to use the computer. I can access the phone from a block away. If I just go to the corner,
Mm-hmm.
I'll get a signal and then I can use the phone. But it's not like, once I get this procedure set up, I still need permanent housing. So that's kind of like the crisis that I'm encountering. But, in order to get to a place where you can have a conversation about it, you need to calm down. You need to have some idea of who might help you. And even if you don't have an idea of who's going to help you, you have to kind of put some feelers out and be very polite and kind and not reactive.
Yeah. Which is
So
very
that's
hard to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then, like, you become like, when I was dealing with my parents and things just blew up, I didn't recognize myself. Like, I was
Mm-hmm.
just screaming and upset. And I don't usually do that. So like, that was just kind of a wake up to myself. Like, you're not behaving the way you would normally behave.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that really made it important for me to just put them on timeout and don't have anything to do with them for as long as I need in order to get my stuff sorted out.
Mm-hmm. 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 Thank you. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now, Amie, is I'm just going to kind of just take a pause and really take in what you had just offered, and then I'll reflect back what I heard and what's resonating and how it relates. And then after I'm done reflecting, rather than ask you a deeper question, I'm going to put the ball back in your court and you can ask me a question and we'll go back and forth that way. But one of the things that I'm greatly appreciating and that I'm hearing is that you are in a place that you can very you are very good at articulating and staying in that calm place, which which is very rare. That's just what I'm getting from this conversation, because there is a focus, there is a poise about you, about that, and that's I think a lot of people could use that kind of support and that kind of help from someone like you with that kind of energy, especially with what you've been through. And you're right, because when you're in that situation, you start reacting, you start doing things differently that you wouldn't normally do. I still have very vivid memories of when I was homeless for 8 months, and there were I really expressed a lot of behavior that wasn't very characteristic of me in that time. I was short with people. I got really upset. I remember at the time I was asked to perform in about 4 different plays throughout the year that I was homeless, and what happened was there was someone, one of the producers or one of the theater owners had a had like a guest house, and they were thinking about offering it to me for a little bit while I performed in their plays and taught for their theater company. But then they kind of withdrew that offer, and I went through a lot of feelings of anger and frustration and that reaction. So that's what immediately came to me as you were saying that. Um, so yeah. Oh, and the medical concerns that you're going through as well too. That's something that I'm I'm curious about as well too, because obviously medical care, insurances, all of that is something that is very very much a political hot button, as it is, a personal hot button as well too. So, so I'm hoping that as others are watching our conversations, they keep that in mind, that there are so many people who are kind of enslaved, psychologically enslaved, because of medical situations, medical bills being so exorbitant. Um, so that's what I'm feeling, and that's what's coming up for me. That's what's emerging for me as I'm listening. As I'm listening to your story. What you're experiencing right now. Now, after hearing my reflection, is there anything you want to add to that, or anything you want to emphasize after listening to my reflection on that?
Um, I I would like, I'm a little bit interested in kind of teasing out this thing that happens when you're vulnerable without housing, where people will offer a place to stay, and yet that place to stay is not always a free place to stay. It's not
Mm,
that you get to do what you want, it's that you get to do what I tell you because you're living here for me.
yeah, yeah.
So I'd like to maybe talk about the vulnerabilities of not having a personal space that is legitimately yours.
Mm,
And I'm not sure how that looks in a question to you. I guess,
mhm,
you wouldn't have to necessarily name names, but
mhm,
when you're homeless, you run into a lot of other homeless people. That's
mm,
just as things go. You interface with people in the same position.
mhm,
And a lot of times that's not helpful because they can't help you, because they can't necessarily give you a place to stay because they're in the same situation.
mhm,
Um, and in my experience, a lot of it has to do with substance abuse and alcohol
mhm,
abuse. like I can't stay with certain friends because I can't trust that I'm going to be able to do the things I need to do while managing, daily activities around their addiction.
Mhm.
Like uh that's my vulnerable place. Is the people I love and care about are always in a position to do what I need them to do. And
Mhm.
so I'm wondering, like, in your experience with homelessness,
Mhm.
that vulnerability,
Mhm.
how did you sort of bolster yourself in
Mhm.
a way that you could then make the steps towards getting safe,
Mm.
getting free of any addictions or any um, groups of people that maybe you cared for so deeply, but you couldn't change them?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, in my situation, and it's funny that you asked that question because I just articulated it for the first time a couple weeks ago with my spiritual community, where they asked me, how did I get past being suicidal? Well, the simple truth is, I didn't. I attempted to take my life. I attempted to die by suicide, and I was unconscious. And when I came to again, I thought that I had succeeded. I didn't think I was a body. I thought I was a spirit, and I felt really free. Free to just free. There was just this freedom. I didn't feel the guilt anymore. I didn't feel the sadness or the anger anymore. I didn't feel this very annihilative feeling. But then, you know, I started to feel a little more of my weight, a little more of the gravity. And it's like, oh, okay, all right, I'm still here. I'm not dead. And at the time, my current wife, who I was dating at the time, just called me up just to check to see how I was doing. And something inside of me just said, it's now time to build my life. With this woman, with Laura, who's now my wife, and that you're going to be okay. Call it a spiritual experience, call it whatever, but there was just this feeling that I had to go through that to be able to be able to be a little bit more empathetic, to be able to be more to be able to listen better as well, and to really to really empathize with what somebody is going through. And I still do work with suicide survivors over that as well. um as far as addictions or anything like that, that was never really a part of my world. It's interesting because I spent a lot of nights, I spent a lot of nights sleeping in my car. And what I would do is I would spend the entire day at the gym. I was a personal trainer at the time, so I guess I was addicted to my workouts. I was addicted to that. And then I would go and I would rehearse or perform in the nighttime. And then I would try to find a secluded corner in the parking lot where the gym was, and that's kind of where I parked myself for the night and went to bed. So yeah, so I really lost myself a lot in the exercise and the gym culture, which was really in itself kind of a toxic environment as well too. Very competitive, very superficial. People were more into their looks than anything else, and that got me for a little bit. Where it was. Yeah, I was just addicted to that superficiality for a little bit, and all the while, just you know, wanting to understand things on a deeper spiritual and psychological level. So yeah, thank you for asking that. So that was my experience with it, and what got me out of it was my relationship with my wife. If I'm going to be honest with myself, she saved me from that, and she's an art therapist, and I do a lot of work still in the mental health field as well too. So we're our relationship continues to evolve too, as becoming more interdependent with each other, rather than, where a lot of people get into a codependent relationship where it feels like one is controlling the other. Because, I would have still been out on the street if it weren't for her. But as our relationship developed, I was free to start to understand and develop how to transcend these social structures that is about psychological slavery, that is about controlling others, that is about how money is used to kind of leverage power over each other. And I think that was able to flourish because of my relationship with my wife and exploring interdependency, exploring how we're both giving and how we're both receiving. And that's still a journey. That's still something we stumble over. But yeah, I think it was having a truly mutual relationship that got me out of it.
That's so important to
Mhm,
stress, because I was just speaking to this other homeless person in the shelter
mhm,
who was saying how she really didn't enjoy the AA meetings because they don't want you in a relationship. And the
mhm,
caring connection is innate in all of us. That's like one of the basic needs, is a connection to others. And it sounds to me like you're really like solving problems for yourself by saying, oh, well, I'm going to work at this gym
mhm,
and I can be there all day. So I don't need a place to live. And I got my car, so I can solve problems that way. The gym has a shower,
mhm,
gym has a phone, like like you just solve problems. But the key for you was this caring connection.
mhm,
And I think a lot of these groups pass that over as part of like, no, this is how we do, this is what we say, this, kind of this militistic
mhm.
dogma that, doesn't resonate with a lot of people. And for me, it does seem like, yes, when you're on your own and you're scared and you have no one to talk to, the most important thing would be a person that you trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just how I'm reflecting on what you're saying about
Yeah.
the chronic problem that's going in every direction from everywhere I look.
Mhm.
People are really struggling with, how am I going to pay with the rent?
Yeah.
Like, where am I going to rent when I haven't worked? Like the jobs that I have don't support housing. This is, and that's what keeps me really, um, like I don't have a suicide issue, like because
Mhm,
to me that's taking what these people are putting in front of me and sucking it in.
mhm,
And what I
mhm,
want to do is say, no, that's you're doing that, and it's not me. So thank you very much.
mhm.
I'm not going to hurt myself because of something you did.
Right. Right.
So I've always had like a very logical, like reasoning, even when I was living in New Orleans and doing a lot of stuff, like I still wasn't to the point where like I was trying to hurt myself.
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
I've never had that experience. So I think that's very important, to be able to feel so deeply about something that you just want to end it.
Yeah.
Like I do feel like that's an important thing to to be able to speak about. And also the fact that it was a caring connection
Mhm.
that brought you out of this issue, that moved you from that superficial place into a place where, no, I want to continue this on. I want to see what grows.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Powerful. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, that was a very powerful reflection. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and it's kind of like, and thank you, because as I was kind of like scratching the surface of that a couple weeks ago, now I'm starting to really deeply appreciate that, and deeply appreciate that caring connection even more. So thank you. Thank you. So my question then, reflecting on your reflection and what I had also just shared, is how do we start? How do we start to build those meaningful, trusting connections?
How do we start? Yeah, I think you have to start where you are.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of issues go on when somebody says, well, I'm going to do this once this happens.
Mhm.
Or when I'm in a housing situation that works for me, I'm going to then do this. I like starting right now, being really present with what can I do right now. And I mean, it can be just very simple, like,
Mm.
in a sense, like if you're just looking around and you see that like there's somebody who's just in need of some kind of assistance, like to just simply offer your assistance.
Mhm.
That's always been uh so I don't want to, here's the thing is because there is that part of me that becomes really codependent,
Mhm.
and then I'm like focused on other people instead of dealing with my own stuff.
Yeah. Mhm.
And to everybody else who watches this later, you know who you are, and I am speaking to you.
Mhm.
You cannot fix other people. You can only fix yourself.
Mhm.
And so, to just be of service, to find a way to serve yourself so that you service others better.
Mhm.
Um, like, in this situation that I'm in where it's really a lot of people are looking for housing. A lot
Mhm.
of people are homeless and they're getting the same messages that I'm getting, and
Mhm.
they're having the same reactions that I'm having, and they don't have the same training that I have.
Mm.
They don't have like the years of studying yoga or the years of sitting in Buddhist retreats, or, they don't have that experience. And, and it's wonderful when somebody says, well, my church is where I find my sanctuary. And I find that really lovely. Like sometimes when somebody's honestly a believer in something, then they're going to be okay because they haven't lost that grasp upon the cord that ties us to the greater good of everybody. Um, but where do you start? I find that really part of like this. Okay, so there's this guy, Whitehead, who came up with this philosophy of process thinking.
Mhm.
And it has that word in it that I think is really important called process. Like to understand that even if you do something now, there's a process that it will initiate. Like there's a seed, like 2 or 3 years ago when we first talked, that was a seed
Mhm.
where we can then watch what happens with that and see what direction we both go.
Mm.
Um, I don't want to come off like I've got everything sorted out because I simply don't. Like I do need a lot more um, intimacy in my life. And by intimacy, what I mean is I can't always be on the phone with people I care about. Like
Mhm.
I need to see them face to face every now and again.
Yeah.
Like that's been a real struggle with losing people over the past 2 years. Having friends, I'm in my 40s, so
Mhm.
friends of mine have died, and all I've done for the last 10 years is talk on the phone to them.
Mm.
And that is so heartbreaking to me. Like the grief that comes up with that is, all I can do is just give myself space to process it.
Yeah.
But then to also really reassert myself in a way that lets people know, like, I am in need of people in my life that I care about. Like I can't just pretend that like talking on the phone twice a day is enough. It's not
Right.
enough. Um, yeah, so I guess for me, starting with being just tragically honest about how things aren't going to work if this is the parameters that are set.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, like how does somebody trust this process? I would say let the process be just what it is and start where you are and get really clear that I'm not going to work third shift like that, because when you're looking for work in a situation like this, you start getting offers for things that are just completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
And you have to have that idea in your head that no, I'm going to let this go. Like this is not a situation that's going to bring me to a place where I'm doing stuff that I am feeling good about.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd like to hear your reflection on that.
Yeah, I'm catching up, and I do want to emphasize that it's okay to take a breather and catch up. I often find myself wanting to go into interviewer mode where I want to keep things going and all that, but I'm checking in with myself and reminding myself it's okay. It's okay to slow down. It's okay to breathe. I mean, look at this. We're 40 minutes into this conversation. It just went by like nothing.
Mm.
Which tells me that there's something very powerful at work here. So, what came up for me while you were responding to the question was being able to have the space to find out what your boundaries are, to articulate what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and I feel like in my work, especially with understanding the difference between extractive economics and regenerative economics, is that you know, we we are devalued, or because sometimes we articulate what our limits are, what our boundaries are, and because like the unreasonable request of working third shift or whatnot. What that does is it benefits the extractive system. It doesn't benefit our humanity. It doesn't benefit, our life. It doesn't benefit our life expression. So that was very much emergent to me, is that I'm very appreciative that you're willing to identify your limitations and your boundaries, which is what I call a dissent conversation. And I find, especially in business and in the extractive economy, people avoid those. They avoid those dissent conversations. What also emerged for me as well too was as I'm sharing this conversation, I'm excited to kind of share the conversation with the people I've had these conversations with so far, like with John and with Randy, with Amelia, who I'll be doing a conversation with later this week, with my colleagues at WINFinity. In that, I feel like we resonate with each other so deeply, and something very beautiful is just emerging in being with each other, in just understanding that we do need time to grieve. We do need time to process. And there's so much going on in the heart space and so much going on unconsciously after this conversation ends, or even before this conversation begins. And what's been reflected back to me recently as well is just how much is going on that we can't articulate yet. But even in the time apart, or the time since our last conversation to this, so much has been percolating, so much has been emerging, and that's it's beautiful how it's expressing itself through this conversation, and through your life experience as well. So that's my reflection, and I'll let you spin a new question based on that, Amie.
Very good.
Oh, before you come up with that question too, your training also came through very loud and clear to me as well too. Like the yoga and the education that you've had. That what also emerged for me is like, it's not, to me, there's something out of balance when somebody is as educated as you and as experienced as you. You're in a situation where you don't have a home, or you don't have that space of your own. That's been really shouting at me as well too, that there's an imbalance there, because people as educated as you and yeah, as people as educated and articulate as you are, being in that situation, that there's something that we need to be paying more attention to. So
Yeah. So without getting into anything that you feel like is uncomfortable for you to
mhm,
discuss, I'd like to maybe explore a little bit about the childhood experiences that you had that allowed you
mhm,
to be vulnerable and to overcome by seeking solutions.
mm,
Because it starts when you're young. Like
mhm,
you're not given this life without some sense that you're here to learn, you're here to heal.
mhm,
So in your history, in your childhood, was there a time, either in your relationship to your parents or relationship outside of your family, where you felt extremely vulnerable, but you were guided in a way towards something?
mhm.
And you of course can always just say next question, and I'll find another way to talk about this. But I feel like it's super important for people to understand that
Mhm,
we get our tools very young.
mhm,
Like for me, I was very young when I learned what violence was.
mhm,
And it really trained me to look for ways to protect myself. So I'm
mhm,
wondering for you if there was like just maybe like a 5-minute example of
mhm,
something that might have really, been the coal that turned to diamond.
mhm. Sure. Yeah. No. What came up for me as you were forming the question, Amy, was the conditions by which I was born and the entire environment of my childhood. I had an uncle who died in a car crash. He was very young, 19 years old, 5 days before I was born. Because of the intensity of that event and the grief, my mother went into labor. She was induced and she went into labor and she had me. Um, and I I don't remember this consciously, but I've been told stories throughout my life, and I do have some recollection of some abuse, some child abuse, where where my grandfather was told when I was born, and this is they were trying to be helpful, but in retrospect, it was such a an icky, cold thing to say. But they would say to him, sometimes when one life ends, another one begins. And my grandfather recounted this story to me when I was probably in my 20s. And he told me, no offense to you, but you're not my son. And I always felt kind of that grief and that anger, and I felt like I bared the brunt of it just for living. Um, so I felt like there was, on that side of the family, also on that side of the family too, there were quite a few deaths by suicide on that side of the family, and there were addictions. There was a lot of abuse. My grandfather attempted suicide as well too when I was a boy. And on the other side, where my father's family, my maternal grandmother, they lost a child before my dad was born, and she developed a really deep faith and a really deep trust in God. Um, and she was kind of like the light, where always being in her presence, there was a generosity, there was this loving energy, and that she had absolutely no doubt that the child that she lost, who was my older uncle, was still alive and having beautiful experiences in heaven. So it's kind of like I had that mix of growing up, where there was the one grandparent that I felt was always kind of resentful of my life, and he was going, and my grandparents on that side divorced, in my early life as well too. And my maternal grandmother had little to do with me. So there was kind of like that cold feeling over there. And then there was this really rich warmth, deep spiritual connection with my father's family. And my paternal grandfather died when I was 8. And, it was pretty, the story that our family told ourselves, that the males in my family did not live to be 60 years old. My dad's younger brother passed in his late 50s. My dad is still alive. I just took him, actually. He has stage 5 kidney disease right now. I took him to dialysis just now, but he's he's going to be 75, this year. And I just kind of see, especially with my children, having him have grandchildren, it's almost like, in some ways, I feel like there's a new lease in his life. He's got a new lease on life, being a grandfather. So it's like he kind of broke that story, and that the males in my family don't live to be past 59. So the story, or the experience, was just kind of growing up in this environment where my life was resented, and really trying to find, the silver lining, the deep spirituality that I got from the other side of the family. So yeah, that's my story.
I don't know how to tell you this, but that line, the males in my family don't live to be 60, I got the same thing. My family said the same thing. And I don't know where that comes from, but clearly, if both of us had some idea about it, that is ingrained in our culture, that men must somehow just burn out like a comet. Like their responsibility is to just make sure they get it all done and be done with it. Like, what is that? Like that, let's start there. Like, why are men so toxically informed about their lineage? Like, this to me is just incredibly interesting that, I mean, let's not get too dark about it, but it's just, it seems really interesting to me that there's like this connection of a phrase that was handed down through our male lineage, and it's simply not true. Your father's still alive. My father's still alive. He's in his 70s, so he lived to be over 60. That was not a true saying. That just, maybe one of them died before they were 60, and that's just the way they coped with it, was just to just say, oh, well, they all died before, that's silliness. That's, I mean, it's really important, I think, for us to take those things that we just say because they were said to us, and like put them in front of us and say, okay, well, where's the truth to this? Is this really true? I find it really interesting that death was such a theme in your family too. And I believe that's coming from my own experience, where like nobody's died in my family. We're all still here. It's ridiculous. It's a huge family. We're all still here. Do any of them call me or contact me or care about me? No. So, like in a way, they are kind of dead, and that is very saddening. Like that's not anything I want to dwell on. But I feel like for you had that experience where you came into the world amidst all these grieving people. And that was just like that was how you showed up. Like that's an awareness that I can honestly say must be a gift for you, because now you're able to converse with others in a way that other people wouldn't even have to breach. They wouldn't, if everything had been handed to them, they had a good childhood, which is a lie. Nobody has a perfect childhood. But if they don't have an experience of having to form strategies to solve problems, emotional problems, then they need people like you. They need somebody to say to them, I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's going it's going to cause some issues for me, such that I need to converse with you about how that looks. Like,
Mhm.
what does that really mean? And so in that way, I really like, it's important that you do this work. It's
Mhm.
important that you continue to talk to people, that you continue to make it public, because it's the learning that others are going to receive that we can't really think about in the present moment. Like, when this goes out there and other people see it, we're not going to have control over that. And that can be a very scary thing in itself, like to get to the place where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing,
Mhm.
and then understand that like you don't have control over who sees it or what happens or how much information they glean from it, and then they use that
Mhm.
to come against you. Like this, these are all fears about the future that you need to kind of remedy in your own mind in order to just do the thing that you're going to do.
Mhm.
um yeah, so that's really what came up, like, was
Awesome.
just the fact that, we do all have our stuff, and it's amazing how, like, as much as we like to try to throw it off, it comes right back to us.
Mhm.
Until we fix it, until we're truly done with it, then it still resonates. And I do feel like there is an element of intergenerational trauma that
Mhm.
comes to us, and we have to remedy it only by looking back, by looking at what happened to our grandparents, what happened to our great grandparents.
Mhm.
Can we even define,
Mm.
what happened to them in any way that makes sense to others? Like,
Yeah.
um, the loss of language, the tragedy of war and trauma. Like, this is important stuff to honor, because it gives us little gifts. It does
Mhm.
give us little gifts once you're able to put it out in the open.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you. So much came up for me just in that reflection, but I want to spin this question next, and this will be the last question before we wrap up. What is the most meaningful work for you? What is your most meaningful work, Amie?
I am a very selfish person. I really enjoy my walks in nature.
Mhm.
I really enjoy being able to sit in nature. I enjoy being able to collect geology specimens. Like,
Mhm.
these are just, this is how I find joy in my life. And a lot of times people want to tell me that I should work in service industries, like I should do counseling, I should do this or that. And in the last 2 or 3 years, I cannot do that.
Mhm.
It doesn't, means nothing to me. I do not want
Mhm.
to teach other people's children.
Mhm.
I don't want to, like, there's just things that just like, just, they take that joy that I have right here and it just goes, woo.
Mhm.
No, thank you. Like, I just can't do, like, I can't do that. That's not for me. And I'm grateful for everybody who does that. I'm grateful for people who want to be caregivers and service workers. And,
Mhm.
part of working in the yoga therapy roles that I've had was really just having to be explicit about, like, I don't do service work. I
Mhm.
support service workers, like
Mhm.
nurses, teachers, professionals. They're the people that I can access in order to support them, because they have all their stuff in a row, like,
Mhm.
they're not in need of housing, they're not in need of medical care. Um,
Mhm.
and the other thing they like to do is they like to tell you, oh, well, you could be a caregiver for developmentally disabled people. And as much as I want to do that, like, I want to feel myself as an advocate for these people, I just can't do it. Like, I don't have that kind of support in my life where I'm
Mhm.
able to care for others. So for me, the work that I do is really very simple. I spend a lot of time in solitude. I spend a
Mhm.
lot of time making art, and the art is totally meaningless. It's not for sale. It's just for me.
Mhm.
Which I'm sure you and your wife have this discussion a lot about her
Yeah.
work, as far as, like, sometimes you just make stuff and that's it. There's no point. You just make stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not, I'm not really looking for anything. Like, I enjoy so much just having a quiet day on the trail and not having like any expectations at all. Like, like, just feeling like this is okay. Like just being out here and having time to myself, recreating in the forest.
Mhm.
I'm really self-sufficient at this point. Like I've done so much on my own that, a kind of one of the things that I'm working on is building more partnership,
Mm,
having somebody that I can rely on, and maybe not just one person, but maybe four to 6 to 8 people who I can rotate through to spend time with, so that I have that back and forth, so that I'm not just in my own head and like trying to do everything myself. Cause that I do get into that space where I'm like, I gotta start a company, and I gotta build a financial trust company. And then I'm going to be like this colander where like the money
mm,
comes in and then it just spreads to all these places around me. And
mm,
oh, that sounds lovely. But if I could
mm.
just maybe just take a walk by the river for today. Like, this is,
Yeah.
this is kind of this the thing that brings me the greatest joy. So
Mhm,
that's what I'm
mhm.
working on, is if it's not a 10 on my list of things I want to do, then I'm not doing it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you've kind of answered one of the last questions that I was going to ask, and that is, who would you like to reach, and what kind of call to action would you like to make to them? But it sounds like that you've done that, that you're just looking for people to join you on the journey, without having to worry about caretaking. Does that sound right, Amy?
Well, and in the real world, like in
Mhm,
in the fiscal economy, which I know that's what drew me to you, was the fact that you're talking about like these trust accounts, these M1 accounts where they're generative, right? Like, I mean, I'm using different language than what you use, but
mhm,
you're talking about generative economy, and I'm going to look at your 2x2 algorithm stuff. I just needed to be pointed there.
mhm,
I didn't necessarily get it, and look at it before we spoke, but I I would like to be able to set people's minds at ease that there is a
mhm,
process, that there is a system. Like you're not going to hear the same things over and over again. You're not going to be stuck in transitional housing for 2 years because of some pandemic,
mhm, mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's sort of where I'm sitting right now. And of course, I do have critical needs that need,
Mhm,
I can't say no when they call me for the wait list for the surgery.
mhm,
That I need to be ready for that. And, part of it is just getting ready for that, just getting to a place where I'm available. And that, I do find that that happens, but sometimes you just gotta
mhm.
be tough about it. You gotta
Yeah.
be cranky old lady and
Mhm.
just let them know, like, like I can't live 4 hours away from the hospital. Like I have to find a place where I'm going to be within driving distance, less than an hour.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And what comes up for me in response to that too, as well, is in as far as the regenerative economy is concerned, it is broken down into steps such as walk, run, and fly. Sometimes, I mean, flying right now is changing the whole fiscal system, and I know that's going to take time. But the walking is what I call the time banking, really the time banking system. That if there's someone in the system or someone in the network that can just give you a ride, they can earn hours doing that. One of the things I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be giving you an hour just for this conversation. It sounded like you may have listened to the conversation that I recorded with Randy, because you knew about how are you arriving and what are you bringing. Did you watch that conversation?
Yeah, yeah. I watched that one, and then I watched the other one yesterday for a bit before I got a phone
Okay.
call, and I had
Well,
to
then
I had
you're
to
getting
take
three
a call.
hours. You're getting 3 hours then that I'm going to put in there. So yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, right now, kind of like being in the middle of it, it seems like okay, I'm still trying to make sense of it, but as things progress, my intention is to make that time we spend together become a fiscal asset, and it will become a fiscal asset once people start to understand, you know, how valuable our relationship really is to each other, and how it is, how valuable what we have to give, even if it's been devalued. One thing that came up to me is when you said art, the art is meaningless. My thoughts and my response was no art is meaningless. It's just that, it's only meaningless it only seems meaningless if it can't be exploited by, by a power regime. That's all. So
Right,
it's
right.
it's
Well,
all,
that sounds like a great topic, art
yeah.
as exploitation. That's,
Yeah, yeah,
you
and
know,
that's kind of where we're moving. Yeah, yeah, and no, I'm excited about showing this conversation to some members in my spiritual community, because that was the talk I did a few weeks ago, where where I talked about my experience with suicide. The whole conversation was about why art matters, and every single person in that room had said they do something artistic, or they express themselves artistically in some way. And I asked everybody, do you feel valued for the art that you create? Almost all of them said no, absolutely not. So part of what I think is emerging in this whole thing is that the time you spend making art, regardless of whether it's commercial art or if it's art that is exploited, it has meaning, because if we can have deeper conversations about it, if we can build deeper relationships through reflecting on art, that time becomes an asset. So that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing how that emerges as well too, because we need that time, not just to express ourselves, but to heal. I think you said it as well too. We're in this life to heal, as well as to learn. So, cool.
very nice sound clip. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Michael, for doing this. And I really look forward to being able to send it to other people. I'm very, very appreciative, and like I'm incredibly open right now. Like there's just so many areas that I could go into.
Mhm.
You feel like I need to kind of maintain some relationships and get some input from them,
Mhm.
and then just move forward and
So,
find out how we all get through this in a way that makes sense to everyone.
yeah, yeah, that takes time. Great. I'm going to stop the recording.